Hi guys, and welcome back to Witchfix. I totally didn't just record my review for And It Harm None and then move straight onto this one. I don't know what you're talking about. But yes, you've guessed it. In this episode we are talking about Circle of 3 Book 14, The Challenge Box, the penultimate book in the Circle of 3 series by Isobel Bird. Trying to amp it up and be excited because honestly I kind of struggled to get through this book. But that's maybe because I feel like the books are actually getting longer towards the end. This one is definitely at least a quarter of a centimetre longer than its predecessor, so I'm on to you, Isobel Bird, who isn't really called Isobel Bird. Anywho, the Challenge Box is a book that I don't think I was really looking forward to reading, to be honest, because I feel like the girls already have enough homilies in their life without having specific challenges that are aimed at making them learn and grow. But So, as you've probably guessed from that statement, the book is about them facing their last challenge before they get considered for initiation into the coven. So that's kind of a big deal as they're nearing the end of their year and a day of study, which is the period over which all the books are set. They each get given a challenge from a box, hence the title, and they have to work on it individually. So they can't collaborate as a group, they can't let each other know what their challenges are. Also, this book kind of mops up some issues from the previous book, and the main plot element is that Annie has been invited to go to New Orleans to meet her older sister, who you might remember she found out about and contacted in Written in the Stars, and met her adopted sister, and it was all great. So she's going to go stay with her in New Orleans, and Kate and Cooper are meant to be going with her as of the end of And It Harm None. However, because of Kate's trying to feed an entire pot of dirt to Sherry for tampering with her plant experiment, Kate has a failing grade in that project for science and is given a replacement project to do also with Sherry over the 3-week break that they have in school, and her parents find out about this and they tell her she can't go to New Orleans. So Cooper and Annie go off on vacation, and Kate has to stay at home and do a geology project with Sherry, which is about as interesting as a geology project would, I guess, normally be. Kate was also told in a previous book, I think it was Written in the Stars, that she could go through initiation. Her dad said, yeah, that's, you can do it, but only if you talk to our priest about it first, which I think was his last ditch effort to turn her off of Wicca. And this is the book in which that conversation finally happens, and in which Kate deals with some of her feelings towards Sherry and all of the drama that's happened over the past 13 books. So Kate's storyline was actually really interesting to read, and for once I found myself skipping over Cooper and Annie's sections and skim reading them just to get back to what Kate was doing, even though Cooper and Annie were in New Orleans and it was meant to be really interesting, and there was some stuff in there about voodoo and Marie Laveau, which is also quite interesting to read about, but their actual plots were not as interesting. So all 3 girls get a challenge, and Kate's challenge is to answer a question that has no answer. Annie's challenge is to give away the thing that is most valuable to her, and Cooper's challenge is to face her greatest fear. So they're all working on those throughout the book. And each girl kind of asks the goddess or the deities in general for help with their challenge in different ways. So Kate makes a little shrine on a hillside where she's gone hiking to the goddess to kind of reconnect with her pagan roots, or the pagan roots of the people who used to live on the land. Annie leaves an offering at Marie Laveau's tomb to ask her for help, and Cooper is given a gree-gree bag by some voodoo practitioners that she meets in New Orleans, and they have their own little plot lines around how they solve their challenges, which I'm not going to give away actually, because I think it's quite cool to read how they come to their solutions, even if it does get a little bit introspective and thinky instead of actual plot things happening. It's just them thinking about stuff, but it is actually quite interesting. I particularly enjoyed actually the elements of Kate's story, because especially the conversation that she has with the priest, because it doesn't really go the way that I thought it was going to go. Actually, that's a lie. It didn't go the way I hoped it was going to go, because I've kind of always wanted Kate to be a bit more rebellious and for people to just not be so perfect and wonderful. And I realised her family were kind of angry at her for being Wiccan, and they did a lot of mean stuff in the books where they found out, but it felt like she just tolerated that and made excuses for them, and again didn't really react in a teenage way. And I couldn't really help but contrast that with the Wicca series by Kate Tiernan, where the teenagers actually act like teenagers in that they make big emotional statements and they throw tantrums and they get angry and they're they actually have emotions and they behave like teenagers, as opposed to this where they behave like teenagers but in like a 1950s instructional play about the dangers of smoking and the benefits of abstinence. It's just very odd. But brushing past that, she has this conversation with the priest, and he basically just tells her that you can't really control what it is that you believe in, and that belief is such a subjective thing. You can't force someone to believe in Catholicism if they don't want to be a Catholic anymore, and that while he's sad to see her leaving the church, he's happy that she has a faith in which she can learn and grow, because that's what it's all about, and some various other things which are also quite interesting to read about. It's also the book where Kate kind of struggles with talking to her family about why she believes in Wicca. That's kind of her overarching plot, is to try and work out how to explain her beliefs to people, because people, including Sherry and her parents, seem to think that it's ridiculous, that she wants to become like a real witch and all this other stuff, and she's trying to work out, because she can explain the tenets of Wicca to them, she can explain what magic is and how you do it and all the like practical stuff that we learn as we go down the path of being witches, but the actual reason she believes in it and why it speaks to her and why she believes in her personal relationship with deity is really hard for her to quantify. And that's definitely something that I can relate to, and I found myself like hardcore relating to Kate in this whole book, because these are also things that I've struggled with and thought about. And specifically in her conversation with the priest, he says basically that there are two types of people. There are people who want to just believe in one thing and have it set down and say this is the thing that is true, and they'll just follow that. They want rules for living their life. And then there are people who question and who spend their whole lives questioning faith and belief and why they believe certain things and why they have to do certain things because of that belief and how they want to express their belief in things, and that is like obviously a harder path, but one that's worthwhile. And I've questioned my faith a lot, like the Wiccan thing, especially because as you get older and you start to move in circles of more, I guess, grown-up people who are like in their 50s and 60s who you work with, and they have like mortgages and kids and stuff, it gets kind of harder and harder to keep having to say, yes, I'm a Wiccan, I follow this religion, that makes me a witch, or just I am a witch, even if you don't follow Wicca, but your spiritual side. And sometimes it does come up. It's sort of like when I start working somewhere new and they sort of ask, oh, do you have a boyfriend, do you have a husband, and you have to be like, actually I'm gay. So there's that. So it's kind of a lie that you come out of any closet once. You have to continuously do it for the rest of your life. Add that to internally questioning stuff as well, and the doubt that creeps in when other people have disbelief in or even ridicule the things that you believe in. It can be quite difficult. So I completely got that part of the book and really appreciated it being in the plot. This was probably my favourite of the 3 books of this series that I read this week. So it was really interesting, and I kind of liked that whole Kate side of things. Now, this book also did something new and interesting, which is that it actually surprised me plot-wise. Which is insane, because usually these things are like predictable as fuck, because they're obviously books for teenagers, and I know I say that a lot, like as if books for teenagers don't have to be intelligent or complexly plotted, but the fact is that a lot of them do tend to be a lot simpler in terms of plot than other stuff that's like more complicated and more adult. There are obviously books aimed at adults that are as simply plotted as well, but I find teenage books to surprise me less in terms of plot, and maybe it's because they're doing plots where they don't have to be as original, because people won't have read that plot like 60 or 70 times already in other books, but I digress. Anywho, at the end of the book, the girls have to present their solutions to their challenges, and then all the people at the pagan bookshop who belong to different covens, they get together and have a little chat in the back room, and they decide if they're ready to move up from the Wicca class to training for a few weeks to be initiated into the coven of their choice. So the actual end result of this is that one by one, everyone in the Wicca class has to go into the back room, where one of the ladies is sitting behind a table in a robe with a mask on. She has a candle in front of her, and they give the trainee witch a candle, and if she can light the candle from the candle on the table, she is allowed to be initiated. She's ready. Now, I'm guessing that they've done something to the candle so they won't light. Maybe some of them have wet wicks or something, but that's not really discussed, and I felt it was weird to not just tell them. It felt like this was kind of a moment that we didn't need. But in the preceding conversation, I kind of had an inkling that maybe Cooper hadn't really dug as deeply in her challenge as the others have, because they had a lot of quite introspective stuff and a lot of personal realisation, whereas she didn't, and her plot kind of felt very secondary or tertiary because there are 3 of them. But I was kind of putting that down to, well, I mean, there's 3 of them to cover in one book, so to keep it short, one of them's obviously going to have a shorter, more abbreviated plot. But then Kate and Annie go into the room and they light their candles and it's all exciting, and they go and join the group of people who are going to be initiated. And I only predicted what was going to happen to Cooper about 2 pages before it happened, which counts as surprising me. Cooper goes to light her candle, and of course it doesn't light. Cooper has not been chosen to be initiated, and the book ends with her freaking out and running out of the shop because she just can't believe it and she's just so upset, which was very exciting. I was excited, I was surprised, I was galled, because everything for these girls usually goes quite smoothly by the end of the book. You know, they all go to the Wicked class, they all get to keep training as witches, they all solve their challenges, they all have these experiences and stuff. So to have it end in that kind of cliffhangery way reminded me a bit of book 5, which is In the Dreaming, when Cooper decides after Midsummer that she doesn't want to be a witch anymore. So it reminded me of that, but at the same time it was also new and slightly different, which was exciting. Now, to be honest, I'm kind of done with reading you guys extracts of these books because, I mean, you already kind of know what the writing style is like. This is book 14, guys, and there wasn't really anything in this one that jumped out at me as something that I had to like read to you and like share because I thought it was so interesting. The whole book itself is actually packed with ideas and kind of conversations with the self, which I think really tap into some of that latent witch problems. Not like the original ones where you're like just learning about magic and learning about the goddess and the god, so like the first few books in the series, but this reaches into some more advanced issues that you kind of run into going down the Wiccan path. So it's definitely worth a read, I think, just to have that, because a lot of book series or books about Wiccan people don't really get this far in terms of discussing these kinds of issues. So definitely recommend reading the challenge box. Unfortunately, that probably means you do have to read the preceding 13 books, but it's worth it, I think. Maybe they're just slowly destroying my brain and I've just lost the ability to contextualize, but I think it's worth it. Those of you who've been keeping score, we now only have 1 book left in the Circle of 3 series, which is Circle of 3 Initiation, book 15. And I've already started reading it because I'm just thrilled to be getting these off my to-read shelf and to make room for other things. But also because after reading the challenge box, I was super excited to get into what happens to Cooper next and what happens at their initiation and how will all these issues be tied up in one last book. So I'm excited. I hope you join me for that final review of the final book of the Circle of 3 series. So in the meantime, get in touch, let me know if you've started reading the series or decided not to because of some of my reviews, and get in touch on the usual way, which is Twitter @Witchfix or Gmail, which is witchfixpodcast@gmail.com. You can also donate to my Patreon, so check that out in the description box, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!